Today is going to be a fun day. It'll be fun for Echo at about 9:30 and fun for Jessica at about 10. So Echo and Jessica are going to present their projects today that they have been working on all semester. And I think you'll find them very interesting. And so Echo, I flipped the coin yesterday in my kitchen, and Echo got the honors to go first. So Echo, would you like to share your screen and make sure you give a little bit of an introduction about yourself before you get into the project? But I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Is my slide up presenting?
It is. The slide's up and presenting.
All right. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting everything situated. All right, I'm Echo Gotzik. I am a graduate student in the Plant and Soil Sciences Department. My advisor, Dr. Smith, is actually here today, so that's good. And this is my first semester as a grad student. So my project this semester, my project this semester was on Dr. Henning's Powell County fertilization studies. So I know that these plots were low in some nutrients, I think especially potassium. And so for this study, I kind of looked at broomsedge and how fertilizer affects broomsedge, botanical composition, and yield. So before I get into the study, I just wanted to talk about why we fertilize. And so as we've been talking about in class a lot, fertilizer is used to improve pastures, and it's guided by what you want to get out of the pasture. So often our goal is to produce higher quality forage for animal production, complement our grass or legume species. So, with tall fescue and the endophyte, you want to add some other species to lessen the effects of that. And then especially to aid existing plants during the growing season. I think that's probably why fertilizer is most commonly used. And so we know that pasture species can attain small amounts of nutrients from the soil, but often, we need a little bit more than, legumes fixing nitrogen. And so the three big inorganic fertilizers I'll be focusing on is phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium. And they often come in commercial treatments together in a mixed bag, but can be bought separately. So with nitrogen, we have urea, and then there is superphosphate and potash. And then I'll come back to how fertilizer is expressed, but basically you'll see it is pounds of nitrogen, pounds per acre of phosphorus, and then pounds per acre of potassium. And then so a little bit about prior research. This is a lovely photo of broomsedge. And broomsedge is one of our perennial weedy grasses that have become a huge problem because there's no selective herbicide that can take them out of pastures or hayfields. And according to this study that I read by Butler in 2006, it's invaded millions of acres of pasture land across the Southeast United States. And the reason why it can be such a big problem is it flourishes pretty much anywhere, low fertility soils and lightly or heavily grazed pastures. And so this study found that controlled burning, tillage, and fertility was the best management practice for controlling broomsedge. And basically the results found that application of NP and K based off the pasture soil tests, like the ones we did at the beginning of the semester, would allow for other species to outcompete broomsedge. And also the study said that controlled burning helped a lot too, but I wanted to focus more on the fertilization. And then so another thing we were looking at is botanical composition. And so another study tells us that high rates of nitrogen that you see here, so 170 pounds per acre, and then some smaller amounts of phosphate and potassium can stimulate our good forages, so our cool season grasses that we do want. And then it helps outcompete most of our broadleaf weeds, which brome sedge isn't a broadleaf weed, but it is similar. And so finally to the study design, Dr. Henning did a factorial study conducted in Powell County, Kentucky on the effects of various fertilizer treatments on botanical composition, yield, and reduction of brome sedge. And so this study was a randomized complete block design, and it had 52 plots that were 10 by 30 feet, and a total of 13 treatment combinations were used. So you can see over here, so treatment 1, he did have a unfertilized control, and then the same levels of each fertilizer. Down here is treatment 13, and then we had all combinations of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And so these were randomly decided in these blocks here. So these are all the treatments that were used for treatment 13, or these are all the plots that were within treatment 13. And so nitrogen was applied in March, May, and August, and then the 360 pounds per acre of potassium was split between March and August, and then all other treatments were applied in March. Okay, so the methods of measurement. The botanical composition was measured via occupancy grid, and each plot had 3 complete grids systematically placed within, measuring the dominant species within the plot, and each grid consists of 20 individual squares. So this is what we use in the pasture evaluation program that I was a part of last summer, and I will be continuing to help this summer. So the way it works is if you were standing at if you took your picture at where I have occupancy grid listed, you would start in the top left corner up here, and you would write down the dominant species. So it might be hard to tell, but I would say that this is white clover, and then 1 through 5, and so on and so on. And you measure what species is most prevalent, and it gives a nice like comprehensive view of what is in the plot. And so the way that Dr. Henning separated out is most abundant species within their plot have their own count, and those would be tall fescue, brome sedge, and Kentucky bluegrass. And then our minor species were categorized into broader categories like weeds, clover, and bare ground was a factor as well. And so some more methods of measurement. The way yield was taken was measured by harvesting a 5 by 30 foot of the original plot size. So this is actually a picture that Dr. Henning sent me from that day they were measuring yield. This is the mechanical sickle bar with the automated weighing mechanism that they actually used. And then plot weights were recorded and corrected for percent dry matter. Okay, so here are the results. I'll get into this more on the next slide. It'll be bigger and easier to see, but basically this graph depicts the botanical composition after the treatments were applied. So the dominant species in the plot is the tallest bar in each group. And then we can see that brome sedge was dominant in our unfertilized control, and then in our phosphate with low levels or no levels of nitrogen and potassium. But brome sedge was the second most populous forage type in 5 other treatments. Fescue was by far the dominant. It was dominant in 9 of our treatment groups, and Kentucky bluegrass was dominant in 2. So this is a little bit larger. I'm going to kind of get into it more now. So our fescue is our red bar, and our bluegrass is our yellow bar, and then our brome sedge is our blue. And these are kind of our most 3 important. As you can see, there's not very much of the other factors except for weeds. It has a little bit. But basically what this is showing here is I ran some statistics on this, and these are our means per treatment group of the species. And then these little bars up here are our least significant difference values. And so this is just an estimate of the true mean. So that we can be confident that the means we gathered are correct. So for example, I know that the least significant difference value for brome sedge is 3.31. So that shows plus or minus. So here's our mean, and then here's 3.31 higher and 3.31 lower. And so what's actually pretty interesting about this study is even in fescue and bluegrass, the least significant difference value doesn't actually, like the highest mean doesn't actually fall within any of the other means. So, you know, it just shows that our treatments have had a large effect on our species. And then, so finally, my analysis, after I ran my statistics, I kind of gathered that we can kind of see that higher nitrogen content in fertilizer helped our cool season grasses. And that's especially true where you can see in treatment 3 here with our high level of nitrogen at 180 pounds per acre. And then again here, and then again in our last 2 treatments. So basically what I concluded is that higher nitrogen rates will lead to production of our good cool season grasses and hopefully lead to a reduction in our unwanted perennial weedy grasses, such as brome sedge in this study. So the highest abundance of any type of grass was tall fescue in condition 4. Essentially, conditions 3, 4, 12, and 13 gave the highest yield of any foliage type. And all of these were at nitrogen at their levels of 180 pounds per acre. And so in conclusion, once again, higher nitrogen fertilizer leads to a relative reduction of brome sedge and higher amounts of cool season grasses, particularly fescue. And so just a final thought, based on prior data collected on these plots, it would be interesting to analyze the botanical composition prior to fertilization, just to see how much the plots have changed. So that is all. Does anybody have any questions?
Very good, Echo.
Thank you.
So how does that study differ from some of the pastures that you've had to rate in the evaluation program?
Well, I've only seen brome sedge a few times out and about, but these are actually have a really high percentage of those cool season grasses. So I think they look pretty good based off of, the data I entered. I would kind of have to see it overall. I mean, I did go out there one time, but I think that this is generally better than some of the pastures, probably because it's more of a controlled study.
And it's a hay field too, and
Yeah.
had not been grazed, especially by horses.
Yeah, I've found it hard to find pastures where there wasn't like not a significant amount of weeds, but definitely they're a factor. And as you saw in the weeds were little to no problem within these plots. So
and leave that graph up. Leave that graph up. What are the big bars, error bars beside each treatment?
Oh, are you talking about these?
Yes.
Oh, was my cursor not showing?
It did, but maybe I missed it. I know that
these are the least significant difference values. So like for this is bare soil and clover, and since they're not really a factor, that's why they're all pretty much the same. But for these, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I did not realize they were sitting over the bare soil and clover numbers, which were very small.
Yeah, there was only I think the means were like 0.25. They were very low compared to this one, where I'm pretty sure this is like maybe like 60 something was the
Right.
mean. So
Right. Very good.
I have a question about the methods you use, I guess, in just the statistical analysis. What program did you use? How did you go about doing it? The statistical stuff.
yeah, so I am in a statistics course right now that uses R. It is a free software you can download. It's honestly pretty hard to learn at first, but it's basically coding. And so that's what I did to, I ran ANOVAs on all of this data, and that's how I got my least significant difference values. And then I put all of that data into Excel, and it made this really nice graph that I thought depicted it pretty well. You can make graphs in R as well, but it's a little more advanced.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Any other questions for Echo? If you think of any during the rest of class today, you can put them in the chat and we can pick them up at any time. But let's give Echo a hand for a good presentation.
Thank you.
Yay, very good. And now you're you know, the good part of Monday can start for you.
Yes, it can.
All right. Okay, Jessica. So
Good morning.
Jessica is going to talk about her project, and I'll let her share the screen and tell us about it. Oh, and Jessica, I don't remind everybody, you know, you are in Campton, but remind everybody why you're in Campton and kind of a little bit about yourself before you get into the presentation.
Okay, so I am Jessica Morris. I am almost finished with my master's. I am a student in the STOW program, but my focus is ag economics. So I've been working with Dr. Kenny Burdine. And if you don't know him, he is wonderful to work with and really knowledgeable in all he does. I grew up in Lancaster, Kentucky, which is about 45 minutes south of Lexington. It is not flat, but it is not steep and hilly like it is here in Campton. I graduated in 2014 from Eastern Kentucky University, and I have a degree in animal science. I started that fall as a 4-H agent here, and I've been here ever since. My family still farms in Garrett County, so I go home most every weekend. We run about 100 mama cows, do a little of our own hay. We do buy some of it. My brother is notorious for collecting cows. So sometimes we're running pretty short and we don't have extra pasture to do for hay. So that's a little bit about me. I grew up showing cattle and really enjoyed that and got to travel around the country. And that's probably what led me to wanting to be a 4-H agent. But I've always loved the farm side of life. So that's a little bit about me. So for this class, I had to do a project because I am a master's student. And with that, all of my projects have to be economically based because that is what my focus area is. So I looked at several different systems and settled on looking at this one because it interested me the most of all of them. And it combines a few things together that I think can be beneficial to small farmers in the state. So with that, was that enough of an introduction, Dr. Henny? Okay, cool. I'm really bad about telling about myself, so I feel like I just get on a soapbox and keep going. So in this presentation, I'm going to tell you why it is important. We're going to talk about storage losses and feeding losses and how those are different. What can we do to improve? We're going to look at a sensitivity table that combines storage and feeding losses. We're going to look at the cost of building this design, and there's 3 different tables that go along with that. Some other benefits that aren't tied directly to a dollar figure, but do have economic impact and benefit. We're going to wrap up and then I'll show you my sources. And this is a picture of one of the farms from home. Cattle producers in today's market must capitalize on every decision that they make in order to stay in the business long term. And it's probably not just in the cattle market, but things are tight and there are so many variables that we each day make a decision about that impact our bottom line and whether we can stay in or stay out. While we all love farming, at the end of the day, we can't have 15 years in the red. It's just not going to pan out and work for us. So this is a table that I have, So this is a table that comes from one of the pubs at UK. It's a little blurry, sorry, but if you look up here at conventional shed, that is the type of system that we're going to call what we look at is a conventional shed. So with that, we could see a 4 to 7% loss each year. What I'm comparing the large bale feeder against is hay that has been stacked on the ground. It has nothing on the underside of it and it is not covered. And that hay stored that way can experience a 25 to 35% loss. Can we reduce this? By implementing, we can cut the loss to 4 to 7%. What you will notice is that putting plastic on the ground and setting the hay on it saves the same as the conventional shed, the pole structure with a plastic roof on a pad, the reusable tarp on a pad, and the bale sleeve on the ground. So there's lots of options, and I just want you to keep that in mind as we move forward and be thinking about what would work for you if this were your farm. But we can't just stop at storage. So a lot of folks really put a lot of effort into correctly storing the hay. And while that is important and it does see significant loss if we don't store it correctly, we can see a larger percentage lost at feeding. This table I took from Missouri Extension, and they estimated hay losses at feeding time using different methods. So if we look at the large round bale for a 7-day supply, we can lose 43% of that bale. If we look at a small round bale fed in place on pasture, so when we talk about rolling it out, they literally take it and they roll it out in a big long stretch, or if we feed it all in place, we could lose 30%. So that is a significant loss at the end of the day. So what does this look like if this were really your farm? So if we take a 5x5 roll, which is about 1,000 pounds according to Southern Forages, we at storage, remember we're going to lose 25% of that roll. So now we are down to 750 pounds of hay. So we take our 750 pounds of hay and we take it over to the field and we're going to feed it. So now we decide that we're going to roll it out across the field. So we're going to lose 43% at that time. So that leaves us with 427.5 pounds of hay that the cattle consume. So if the hay we purchased was $40, not $40 a ton, that should say $40 a bale, we would lose $22.90 per bale, which is significant when we talk about feeding 100 bales over the year. So I chose to look at the Eden Shale large bale feeder, and I'm going to, Dr. Henning, get out of this and go to their website real quick to show kind of the progression of that. This might work, it might not. Can you all see my screen? Is it the blog, Dr. Henning?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. So instead of stealing all of their pictures, I wanted to show you all on here what they have done. So this picture, as you'll notice, they have poured concrete. They have a barrier around it that is rock or gravel. The sides are built out of wood. They have taken 2 feeding panels and placed guards on the inside of them to push the hay along. Up here, if you'll notice, there's wheels. And so the length of this structure is 40 feet, and these wheels will roll along as the cattle push against it to eat the hay. So from the time that the hay is cut and done, they're going to move the bale and place it in there when it is safe to do so. And then it stays there until it's ready to be fed. The first year did not have a cover over the top of it, and they decided that they needed the cover. So they installed a hoop barn structure over the top of that. So that is this white that you see here. As the cattle walk up, Dr. Higgins' design believes that you should have a third of your herd able to eat at one time. So this one is built for 30 cattle. So that is what all of the figures that you'll see in the rest of my presentation are built off of, is using it as the model for 30 head. The one thing that I want you to remember as we look at some of these other pictures is this is not enough hay so this was the very first year, but this is not enough hay to go for the entire year in the barn. At some point, you would have to restock the feeder. So these are some pictures. They stack the hay on its end and on the ends instead of the sides. This is some of the cattle using it. And it does have a feature that if you don't want the cattle to continue to push, you want to limit the amount of hay that they're getting to, you can put brakes on it and stop it from being able to push forward. So the cattle just lean through and eat. The black bars that you see, someone had to weld. It is constructed specifically for this design. It is not something that you can go out and buy. The cattle, they were concerned that they would want to hang out in the structure, and they determined that they pretty much come in and eat and then they go on back out. The only time that they noticed that they were congregating, so to speak, inside of the facility was when a large winter storm had came. And as they push along, it allows the manure to not build up in one spot. And then where it is concrete, it is easy to clean that back off. These are a few of the pictures. And the push guard is that you're seeing here in the screen is important. Otherwise, the hay falls out and we can experience larger losses. Okay. We're going to see what happens when I go back into this. Okay, can you all see the screen again?
Good.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if that would work right or not. So, what does this look like on your farm? A producer must reflect on their own operation. One size does not fit all in regards to whether this is the best economic decision or not. So this is a sensitivity table. And ag economists love them, I have come to find. Look at this table. We are assuming that we are looking at the cost of feeding 30 cows 8,000 pounds of hay per cow per year, which is the reasonable average for Kentucky. So when we look at those numbers, that's 8 5x5 bales per cow for a total of 240,000 pounds of hay needed. And that's the equivalent of feeding 240 bales that are 5x5. And we also base this on feeding 120 days, which was the average for, it was found in one of the publications. So this is where the farmer really has to look at their own operation. If you're paying $70 a ton for hay and you lose 10% of the hay, you're losing $840 a year in hay loss, which is not great, but it's not terrible. What really gets concerning is over in this area. If we're losing half of the hay on our farm, which is from that first example, if we have no feeding system and no storage system is likely. And we're paying pretty much anywhere over here, $70 to $90 a ton. We're losing over $4,000 a year very easily. At what point do we say the cost of what we're losing makes up for building this facility? You have to decide yourself. So I looked at how much it costs to build the large bale feeder. So for this very first table I'm showing you, all the supplies are listed here, and those building designs are where on Eden Shell's website you can actually download them at no cost. And if you have some sort of background in building, you could easily build this design yourself at home. This is for materials only, no labor is included. This assumes that the producer has the capability and knowledge to build the design from the plans. So material cost was $14,456.82. Sure, you could probably get some of these items up here cheaper. The hoop structure is build it yourself. Some things that we have to assume here is that the rock is being spread 34 foot by 48 foot, and we're spreading it 6 inches deep. Concrete pad is 21 and a half by 40 feet. And some of the items that you will notice, concrete comes in yards. We needed 11 yards. Rock, when I was talking to a contractor, it would actually come in a triaxle load of rock, which is 25-ish tons. We only needed 21 and a half, but they just flat out said they're not going to bring you 21 and a half tons. So you would be buying 25-ish tons of rock. So all of that is reflected in this price over here. So you're going to have a little more rock and a little more concrete than you really need. That also assumes that you have the ability to site prep, pour the concrete, install the hoop structure, and weld all of the items that have to be welded. The next table that I'm showing you is the size of all of the rock and concrete is the same. All of that we're going to assume is the same. The only difference is we are paying Kentucky Hoop Barns to install the hoop structure above the concrete pad when we have already had it poured. So they will do so for $5 a foot, and so, or a square foot. So that's going to cost us $10,000, which brought it up $2,500. So now we're sitting at $16,956.82 if they install the hoop structure. The last table that I made is all materials and all labor, and it assumes that the producer pays someone to do the entire project. The farmer does not have time, the producer does not have time. They are going to pay somebody to do the whole thing. They just want to show up and it be ready to be used. And so with that, the labor, which will vary based on what part of the state you are in, I took an average of 5,000, brought us up to $21,956.82, which seems like a lot of money for a structure. But when we think about storage loss being 25 to 35% with no system, the feeding loss is 43% when it's rolled out. And there's lots of benefits to this. Prevents loss during feeding and storage. It's a combined system. Reduction of damage to pasture and feeding area. We don't have the tractor running out in the field. We don't have cattle all trampling and feeding out of the same area for the whole year. We're able to save some of our other pasture areas. Convenience and safety. That same farmer who may not have the time to build this may have a job in town, maybe on the road, doesn't have time. He may also enjoy the convenience of this factor where he's not having to be out there every day feeding or once a week feeding. He can go check his cattle and be gone and not have to fire up a tractor or move anything. For farmers, we have lots of part-time farmers in this state, and for those folks who maybe leave behind a spouse and children that are in charge of doing some farm chores, this is a convenience factor. He's not having to worry about hay being put out. He's not having to worry about the safety of those he's left behind to do the feeding. They can simply check the cattle and be done for the day. And then a reduction of illness and injury. When we don't have cattle standing in mud, there's going to be less runny noses. There's going to be less injuries, which affect our reproductive health. So those are some benefits that we have to consider when we're doing that. However, over here at our building costs, this is not a cheap system to put in place. We're not going to be able to pay for it in a year with the savings of the hay loss. There are other options available that do cost less to install, and there are other feeding options that are available that are much less to purchase. So it comes into looking at what is best for your farm. Do you want a short, quick savings? Do you want to save the money over a long time? So back to in the beginning, what would you do on your farm? Self-reflection is key. What is best for my family's operation is not best for everybody else's down the road. So they have to really think about what their priorities are and what is best for them personally. And then these are my sources. All right, does anybody have any questions?
Good job, Jessica. So would you go back, would you show us your, give her a hand, you bet. Would you go and show us the table of losses?
Yes. So here's our sensitivity table. So there is a magic formula.
You're gonna have to share your screen.
Oh, sorry. Can I show you this table in Excel and I'll show them the formula?
I think you can.
Okay, cool. We'll see how good my technology is today. Sometimes it's not the best. Okay, now share my screen. Okay, can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay. So here is the sensitivity table. So these are really easy to do in Excel.
Right. So what I'm trying to do is try to figure out how many years does it take to pay for it based on some of your, hay losses. And
Right. So to come up with this table, you can play with any number you want over here. In the publication, Dr. Haney, I gave him the formula to use instead of the Excel file. But what you're going to do is it looks at the total amount of hay that you have to have for the year. You have to figure this up yourself. And then you multiply it by the 10% because that's what you're going to lose.
right.
Or if you're going to lose 30% or 35%, whatever you deem that you lose on your farm, multiply that by that, parentheses around it. And then you're going to multiply that by the price of hay per ton divided by 2,000 pounds.
Right.
And it gives you these numbers that I have cut out. So if you're losing 60% of your hay, which we could easily be over here in this number, and hay in Kentucky this year, we could easily have paid $80 a ton for. So if you can build it yourself, and you have that knowledge, you could pay for it in the first 3 to 5 years. Whether you're having it built for yourself or if you build it all yourself, within the first 3 to 5 years, you can pay for it. There are some things you have to think about. The structure on the hoop barn is probably not going to last 20 years. So at some point you would have to replace that. But in the initial building, you could pay for it probably in 3 years if you build it by yourself in this $80 a ton, and if you're losing half of your hay a year.
Okay. So, you got into tell us why you picked this project. I mean, it has it's a personal thing, right? I mean, you're gonna talk to your brother about it, right?
Right. So let me stop sharing. There you go. So at home, my family, I am blessed that I have a progressive farmer dad at home. Not everybody has that. And he was always big about trying to do things the right way. And when new things came about, that we were willing to try them. I am also blessed that my guys at home are very handy, and I have learned a lot of projects on the farm because my dad, I've always been able to help and whatnot. So we can, and there's enough of us that we can build these types of things ourselves. 3 years ago, we started, we built onto our barn. Over to the left side, my granddad used to run a dairy, so it was already concreted. So I should start there. It was already set in concrete. And my brother built sort of like a fence line feeder, but we feed under roof to feed the cattle at one of our farms. For Christmas that year, my brother got a camera. So we, like a security camera that runs off Wi-Fi, so it doesn't have a monthly charge. And we set it right above the feeder. So it's kind of set up in a U shape. And so he backs into the stall, unloads 4 bales of hay, drives away, and we're never out in the field where the cattle are. You drive down the main aisle of the barn. So cattle come up from 3 different directions and eat. Half of our cattle can eat at one time. So that's a little different than Dr. Higgins' design. And we've saw a lot of positive things from that. When the cattle are fed under the barn, we can, I can log in on my cell phone right now and see our cattle and see if anything's up near the barn. If we all have day jobs, we're not all there all the time. Sometimes when it gets dark at 6 o'clock in the winter, it's really difficult to make sure you've found all your cows. And we calve in January and February a lot of times. So it's really nice to be able to see, hey, 62 came up today. 47 did not. Okay, where was 47 at? Why can we not find 47 right now? It allows me to be able to look at cattle sitting in Campton that are on Nina Ridge in Garrett County. But the biggest impact that we have saw is that we have saved 35-ish% of hay. We're feeding 35% less rolls than we were before. And that's a huge, huge savings for us. So when we started, my brother likes to buy farm and collect cows, as I already told you all. So on one of our largest farms, we don't have any feed. We did not after that have any sort of feeding system. Like we stored it correctly, but we did not have any feeding system. So when I tell you we've saved 35% of hay, we're feeding less of it, we were already storing it correctly. So I am assuming that all of those are feeding losses, and which is so big to us because, everybody preaches about storing it correctly, but we can't stop there. And so this kind of hits close to home for me after that. And we saw the positives on 2 of our other farms. We've installed systems similar to what are at my mom and dad's, like what we call the house farm. But we did not set them in concrete. They are in rock gravel pads, and they work just as well. They're a little bit more difficult to clean off, but they do the same thing. They save a ton of hay. The hay itself sits on a concrete pad, but the cattle are walking on concrete.
So would your brother ever build one of these, or your dad?
So yes, and that's something we have talked about. We have a farm that's just across in Madison County, and it's got 400 acres on it. So there's more cattle there than 30. And we do get some hay off of it. So it would work better to have a storage facility and a feeding facility all in one there than it would at the house. There's no way after what we built that we could store that many bales inside the barn. But if they did something like that at the other farm, it could work really well. And so my dad actually, he's been he's been interested in all this. So he's watched the YouTube videos and he's checked out all my presentation. And when I cite my contractor in there, it's my dear sweet dad. That's what he does during the day. So, and prices fluctuate. Something he was telling me last night as we were going over this, because I made them all listen to my presentation again so I could practice, was that concrete from the time that I did that table 2 weeks ago, I think Dr. Henning, has already went up to $125 a yard in the area where I'm at. So it
From
grows.
what was the first figure?
I think it was 100 or 110.
Okay.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
$100 a yard. Yeah. So it's already went up 20, 25 bucks.
Okay. Well,
Telling me here that concrete's more like 135 to 140. So.
Ouch. Yeah.
Because it's so far from everything.
Yeah. Well, that's a really great presentation. Are there questions from the class for Jessica?
I just had a quick question. So on your I think it was your cost analysis table where it said like 60%, would that be if you literally just put it on the ground? Is that those type of losses?
Yeah.
Okay.
So with that 60%, it would be equivalent to that example I showed you of the 5x5 bale being destroyed. So
Okay.
not stored, they put it maybe in a row and stored it on the ground, but there's nothing covering the top or the bottom. And then when we take it and we feed it, that loss was associated with taking the bale and unrolling it out across the pasture and letting the cattle come in from all different angles.
Okay.
They can lay in it, trample it. There's really no protection for it. So when I say you have to think about other areas that you could look to save some of that hay is if you put a ring around it and have the guards around the bottom, that's going to significantly reduce your losses, but you're tearing up that ground so bad around the ring.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Jessica?
I feel like I've talked a lot.
It's okay. It's your day to talk. Okay. Well, class time is up. So thanks everybody for being with us today. Wednesday, I'll be back in the classroom. In fact, we'll be in the classroom regular all the way out until next Wednesday, and then we'll be done. We have a guest on Friday, Krista Lay. Will talk about the pasture evaluation program. So that'll be fun. And again, let's give Echo and Jessica a hand. Good job. And we'll see you all on Wednesday. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.